Ignore my beautiful outfit and my beautiful shoes. So today we're going to be talking about a book I really like called Being No One by Thomas Metzinger. The subtitle is called The Self-Model Theory of Subjectivity. So the way that I'm talking about this might be a little bit advanced. If you want a more elementary introduction into this book, right here, really good philosophy video about the topic. I would suggest watching that, making sure that you understand that very much, and then coming back to this, because then it might make more sense. I also would just suggest it in general. I think it's a really good video, and I think it really gets the point across a lot better than I'm going to be able to do without just plagiarizing it. So watch that video, please. So Phil, what the fuck is Metzinger talking about? Well, I got the book right here. I'm opened up to the first chapter. I've read this book a million times. Really, what this book tries to talk about is, even though it's called Being No One, and you would assume when Metzinger claims that nobody ever has or was a self, right? What he's trying to say is that consciousness doesn't exist, which is not exactly true, because he uses the term consciousness very loosely, right? He describes conscious self models, right? So what he's trying to differentiate between is the fact that consciousness and identity, or what he describes as the phenomenal self, being so connected, right? The perceiver and the lens in which we perceive. And what he tries to claim here is that we mistake ourselves as selves rather than as models, as a process, as a system that views consciousness through this kind of glass lens. And that might be a little bit confusing, so let me read straight from the book, because Metzinger just straight spits in this next section. Nobody ever was or had a self. All that ever existed were conscious self-models that could not be recognized as models. The phenomenal self is not a thing, but a process, and the subjective experience of being someone emerges if a conscious information processing system operates under a transparent self-model. So you are such a system right now, as you listen to these sentences, because you cannot recognize yourself model as a model. It is transparent. You look through it, in a sense. You don't see it, but you see with it. In other, more metaphorical words, the central claim of this book is that as you listen to these lines, you constantly confuse yourself with the content of the self-model currently activated by your brain. Quick warning, if you ever look up this book, or if you ever watch a YouTube video discussing this book, especially one video by Wisecrack talking about something about Rick and Morty, but it presents this book as a very nihilistic perspective. And the reason why is because that central claim of nobody ever has or was a self sounds very nihilistic. It's like, no, I don't exist, I'm not a real being, kind of. But what we're really trying to get across here is like, hey, the way we're talking about this experience is kind of whack. We're kind of talking about it wrong, you know? And we need to be more precise, not only us just talking about consciousness and the way we perceive it and conceptualize it, but the academics also really need to make sure that we're all on the same page of the most modern interpretation of consciousness, so that we're all kind of trying to talk about the same thing. If anybody's got a disagreement with that, no? Okay, let's get on the same page. That's kind of what this book really does. It's not nihilistic, but it kind of is, but it's not really. I feel like that's too strong of a word to just throw on this book, because it's not really that. So my main disagreement with that Wisecrack video more comes down to semantics and the way that nihilism is discussed, because it sounds like a nihilistic idea, like you are not in control of your self-identity and everything is processed by a biological mechanism. That's not really nihilistic. That's in my thought process, but it is, but it's not. It's very more of a semantical disagreement than anything else. So if you want my opinion on this book and why it is so awesome, I have to warn you that the author might not actually like my conceptualization of their relation to the phenomenal self and consciousness. I perceive this book as a very necessary semantical overwriting of the conversation we have between our relation to consciousness. And when I say our, I mean the phenomenal self, of course. So in fields like Marxism, the way that we reconceptualize consciousness can inform so much about our self-models and its relation to the hegemonically oppressive systems that we find ourselves within in society. In post-structuralism, we can relate that to some sort of psychoanalytical aspect of the self-model and relate it to power structures and power dynamics and how oppression can come through that. And even in less cool fields, aka empiricism, we can relate this reconceptualization of the self and our relation of the self-model to the process of consciousness, to how our brain interacts, which Metzinger, of course, explores these thoughts, and that's why I don't want to spoil the book too much for you about it, to talk about qualia and, you know, different cool conceptualizations. It's a very awesome book. Now, of course, I'm not a big fan of empiricism, not for any, like, Andrew Tate reason, like, my own personal experiences are the only thing that are true, women are bad drivers, nothing stupid like that, of course. More of the fact that reproducing the same image a billion times doesn't reveal anything about the nature of reality, and I can make a whole Nietzschean argument right now, it doesn't matter. I think it's a really cool book. I think that if you are exploring any field that relates to the idea of consciousness, or you just want to know more about consciousness, Being No One by Thomas Metzinger is a really cool book to pick up, but it's like $60. Just find a PDF online. You can probably find one. If not, maybe I'll find one. Just ask in the comments. I don't know. P.S. The book is like 1,000 pages and the font's really tiny, so there's a lot of words in this motherfucker. So take your time, read it very carefully, ponder on it after what you've read, and just, think about what was discussed in the chapter. You kind of have to work through it like a textbook a little bit. I'm so sorry if that bores you. It bored me, but I got through it. You got this.